poor girl sneaked into the company, caused chaos, and made the CEO fall madly in love. Before we begin the story, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Alice looked up at the towering Miller Enterprises building, then glanced at her reflection in the glass entrance. Her jeans, once blue, had faded into an indistinguishable shade of sad gray. Her fabric backpack, long past its prime, looked more like a worn-out grocery bag with a zipper. And her hair? Better not even mention it. This will work. I'm just a girl on a mission. A girl and a mission, she muttered, trying to convince herself. The plan was simple. Get in, deliver a letter to Thomas Miller, and get out before anyone noticed. Easy, right? Wrong. First obstacle. The revolving door. Alice charged in and got stuck in the middle, pushing one way then the other, only to realize she was spinning in the wrong direction. When she finally escaped, she crashed shoulder first into the receptionist's desk, knocking over a cup full of pens. "Hi, I'm here to deliver a letter," she announced, as if that were completely normal. The receptionist, who looked like she had stepped out of an executive fashion catalog, eyed Alice from head to toe with a face that clearly asked, "How did you get in here? Appointment? Badge? Invitation? Secret code?" she listed, raising an eyebrow. "I have a letter," Alice repeated, as if that would solve everything. "It's urgent, for Thomas Miller. I just need to see him for a second." The receptionist didn't even blink. She pressed an invisible button, and within 3 seconds, a security guard appeared, built like a 4-door wardrobe. "No badge, no entry," the human wardrobe declared. Alice looked at the letter, then at the security guard, then at the elevator doors, just as they opened. Without thinking, she let out a small squeak and ran, slipping inside before the doors could close. "Hey! Come back here!" the security guard shouted, taking 2 steps before realizing no one was stopping the elevator. Alice had rushed in so fast that she crashed into a guy carrying a tray of coffee. As the elevator went up, she tried to wipe cappuccino foam out of her hair. Not knowing which floor to get off at, she pressed the first button she saw. When the doors opened, she stepped into a room full of people wearing headsets, cables running across the floor, massive screens, and the buzzing energy of a corporate talent show. "Okay, Alice, just blend in," she whispered to herself. 2 steps later, she kicked over a box of equipment, knocked down a stack of promotional gifts, got her pant leg caught on a giant strip of tape, and nearly took down a studio light with her. "Who is that?" someone in a headset whispered. "Probably a cleaner, or a delivery person, or a lost soul," another person answered. "Did someone lose a cousin in the elevator?" a cameraman joked. Trying to find a way out, Alice spotted a huge door at the end of the hall. It had to be a reception area or a waiting room. Without thinking, she walked in. It was Thomas Miller's office. And, of course, she slipped on the expensive rug, bumped her hip on the desk, and landed on her knees right in front of him. He was facing away, reading a serious document. Thomas turned slowly, expecting to see an executive or, at the very least, a document courier. Instead, he saw Alice, messy-haired, on her knees, holding out a letter like it was an overdue tax bill. "I knew today was going to be strange, but this," Thomas muttered, looking at her like she was a mirage. Alice jumped to her feet so quickly that she hit her knee on the desk and let out a loud, "Ow!" But she smiled as if this were all perfectly normal. "Hi, I'm Alice. I have a letter for you." She stretched her arm out so forcefully it looked like she was trying to reach across the desk. Thomas folded his arms. "That explains why you ran into my office like you were fleeing the police?" "Oh yes, I can explain." Alice quickly fixed her hair, trying to appear professional. "I thought this was the bathroom." "The bathroom?" "Yes, but it's not. So since I was already here, I figured I'd just hand you the letter." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "And do you usually enter bathrooms on your knees?" "No, that was because I was testing the rug. Its softness. Very nice, by the way. Congratulations." "And the letter?" "Oh, right. The letter is from my mentor. He asked me to deliver it to you personally. And being a very dedicated and professional person, I thought sneaking in would be faster than explaining things at reception." Thomas took a deep breath. "You thought breaking into one of the most secure buildings in the city was a professional idea? I actually found it. I really did. I was so focused on the mission, you know? I'm like one of those ninja messengers. And to be honest, the receptionist gave me a weird look and I got a little nervous. And, well, here we are. Thomas took the letter but kept staring at Alice as if trying to figure out what piece of the puzzle she was. And your master? Who is he? She, something. I forgot the last name, but he told me he's a close friend of your grandfather, or your father, or your dog. I got a little nervous when he was explaining. Thomas rubbed his temples. Alice, right? That's me. Alice, trusted ninja messenger. He pointed to the chair. Since you went through all this trouble to deliver a letter, sit down. Let's see what's so important. Alice sank into the chair, which was so soft she almost disappeared into it. She looked around, trying to take in the luxurious office, and swore she could hear the notes of the Imperial March from Star Wars playing in her head. Thomas opened the letter, but for some reason he couldn't quite explain. The last thing he wanted at that moment was to read it. He wanted to understand who this girl was, the one who turned a simple delivery into a full-on comedy skit. Sitting in that chair, which felt like an expensive hug, Alice swung her feet in the air while watching Thomas Miller read the letter. She was expecting some dramatic reaction, maybe a gasp of surprise or even a single tear rolling down his cheek. But he kept the same serious expression, though now with a slight crease on his forehead. So this letter is really from Shi Qingwen? Thomas asked without looking up. Shi Qingquan, Alice corrected, raising a finger. But you were close, almost got it. And you are what to him? Thomas asked, curious. I'm kind of like his apprentice, or honorary niece, or divine punishment, depending on his mood, Alice said with a grin, trying to break the ice. Thomas closed the letter, stared at Alice for a few seconds, and for some reason he couldn't explain, started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but a real, unexpected laugh. Alice blinked fast, confused. Are you okay? I didn't write anything in the letter. I didn't insult anyone, she quickly said. It's hard to imagine Shi Qingquan sending such an important letter with someone so... Thomas searched for the right word, but Alice finished the sentence for him. So unreliable? She laughed at herself. Relax, he says that all the time. Before Thomas could respond, the office door swung open, and a suited assistant rushed in, looking frantic. Mr. Miller, we need you in the main hall. The launch event for the new product line starts in 5 minutes, and the spokesperson is missing. Missing? Thomas closed his eyes for a second, already feeling a headache coming on. Alice, like a confusion antenna, jumped out of her chair. I can help, she said, without even knowing what they were launching. You? Thomas narrowed his eyes. Alice, this event is being streamed live to hundreds of investors. It's not your neighborhood talent show. Hey, I once hosted a charity bingo night in my neighborhood. I'm practically a pro, she said, hands on her hips like a true star. Out of time and out of options, Thomas gestured to the assistant. Take her. Anything is better than having no one up there. 5 minutes later, Alice stood backstage, surrounded by nervous staff, makeup artists rushing around, and a producer shouting into a microphone. Can someone explain what I have to do? Alice asked, while a makeup artist applied powder to her face with the subtlety of sanding a wall. You just go in, smile, present the product, and walk out. No improvising, warned a woman with a headset. No improvising? That's kinda hard for me, Alice mumbled, but no one heard her. When her name, which wasn't even her real name, was announced, Alice walked onto the stage. The bright lights blinded her for a second, and the audience was full of people in suits, holding champagne glasses like they were extensions of their arms. Everyone was expecting a professional and elegant presentation. Alice tripped on the first step, grabbed the microphone stand for balance, accidentally yanked the cable, and knocked over half of the digital banner behind her. A collective groan echoed through the room. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of, finance, she began, smiling nervously. My name is, well, actually it's Alice, but it looks like there's a typo on my badge. Anyway, tonight we're here to introduce the new line of... She glanced at the screen, which was now showing a Windows screensaver. The cutting-edge, state-of-the-art respiratory innovation. Or something like that, she finished, chuckling nervously. At the back of the room, Thomas put his hand on his forehead, but to his own surprise, he was laughing. Really laughing. Again. Alice kept talking without a filter. She showed the wrong product, mixed up percentage numbers, and at the end, while trying to step off the stage, got her pant leg caught on a lighting stand, knocking the whole thing over. It was an accidental comedy show. But what should have been a total disaster turned into an instant online hit. The guests, used to stiff and predictable events, had so much fun that they started recording and posting on social media. Within hours, the most clumsy spokesperson in history was going viral. After the event, Thomas found Alice sitting on the hallway floor, holding her shoes in her hands, looking like she had just run a marathon of embarrassment. "I told you I was a professional," she said with a small smile. "A professional at causing chaos," Thomas replied, crossing his arms but with an amused sparkle in his eyes. "Seriously, I'm sorry. I was just trying to help. The letter was important, and I guess I got carried away," she sighed. "If you want, I can disappear now." Thomas studied Alice. She was a walking disaster, a whirlwind of honesty and improvisation. Everything he wasn't used to, and for that very reason, he didn't want her to disappear. "Tomorrow, you start working here," he said. "What?" Alice's eyes widened. "Are you sure? I nearly brought your whole building down today." "Consider it a survival program for my employees," he joked. "You said you wanted to deliver the letter in person because you were reliable. Let's see if that's true." Alice jumped to her feet, excited. "I promise, I'll be the best, whatever my job title is," she said, extending her hand. Thomas shook it, feeling for the first time in years that something or someone was about to completely turn his routine upside down. The next morning, Alice showed up with a backpack almost bigger than she was, packed with snacks, notebooks, and even a flashlight. She swore she might need it. As she walked past reception, she waved at the receptionist with a victorious smile. "I'm back, sweetheart," she sang. "Is this really happening?" the woman muttered in disbelief. Up in the executive office, Alice was given a makeshift desk next to the copier. Her mission? Help wherever needed. "Alice, can you organize these contracts alphabetically?" an assistant asked. "Of course. Is that with A or C?" she answered, completely serious. Within 2 hours, Alice managed to spill coffee on the printer, answer a call, thinking it was the intercom, set off the fire alarm while trying to open a drawer. Each time something happened, Thomas was informed. And each time he heard about another disaster, he laughed to himself in his office. Alice didn't know it yet, but her spontaneous chaos was bringing something to Miller Enterprises that hadn't been there in a long time. Life. And for Thomas, this clumsy woman was the first genuinely interesting thing to shake up his perfectly predictable world. Now officially employed at Miller Enterprises, Alice looked at her makeshift desk with the excitement of someone who had just won the lottery, even if her desk was technically a repurposed shelf next to the copier. "A palace of my own," she sighed, placing a small plastic pot with a $3 succulent on top for a personal touch. In the middle of her excitement, the printer suddenly started spitting out paper non-stop, like a possessed machine. Alice tried pressing all the buttons, blowing on the sensor, and even giving the panel a gentle tap, but nothing worked. "This is a trap," she whispered, throwing herself over the machine to stop the avalanche of contracts flying onto the floor. Meanwhile, Thomas was walking down the hall and saw the scene. There was Alice, practically hugging the copier, covered in papers, holding a stapler like it was a self-defense weapon. "Why am I not surprised?" Thomas muttered, unable to hide his smile. He stood there for a few seconds, just watching. Alice was like a tiny walking hurricane, completely out of place in this world of neatly tied ties and serious faces. And for some strange reason, watching her was becoming addictive. "Mr. Miller." Alice saw him and immediately tried to straighten up. But as she got up, her shoelace got caught on the copier and she fell flat on the floor like a sack of potatoes. Thomas took a deep breath. "Alice, have you ever considered working for a demolition company?" he asked, offering his hand to help her up. "That could be my backup plan," she smiled. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "I have an off-site meeting now. Come with me." "Me? Why?" "Because apparently, if I leave you alone for more than 15 minutes, you might bring the whole building down." "I'd rather keep you under surveillance," he replied dryly. But the truth was something else. Thomas was starting to realize that he liked having her around. It didn't make sense, but it made a difference. Alice hopped into the luxury car, carrying her huge backpack and a small succulent pot on her lap. "The plant needs to breathe," she explained when Thomas gave the pot a curious look. The driver, impeccable in white gloves, tried not to react to the fact that he was transporting a passenger holding a plant and a lunchbox. "Is this meeting at some fancy restaurant?" Alice asked. "Something like that," Thomas replied, without going into details. A few minutes later, Alice found herself sitting at a table so elegant that she was afraid to breathe too hard and knock over some silverware. Thomas was on the other side, looking at documents on his tablet, while the waiter handed her a menu in French. "That's a lot of vowels for such little food," Alice whispered, looking at the menu. "Is this a dish or a Wi-Fi password?" Thomas looked up. "You don't have to order anything fancy. Just pick whatever you like." "Do they have coccinelle?" she asked, completely serious. Thomas choked on his water. "Probably not." "That's fine. I adapt. Adaptation is my middle name. Well, my third. My second is Disaster. Alice Disaster Adaptation Silva. Nice to meet you." She extended her hand as if first time. Thomas took her hand but just shook his head, smiling slightly. "Why did you take this job?" he suddenly asked. "To be honest," she put the menu down, "I just wanted to deliver the letter and go home. But then you hired me. And, well, who am I to turn down a fancy job like this? Even after everything that happened, you almost ruined the company's event." "Oh, but it was fun," she said. "And look at that, you're smiling. Mission accomplished." Thomas was quiet for a few seconds. She was right. He had been smiling more and more since Alice showed up, but it made no sense. He, known as the most serious and cold CEO in the city, was now laughing because of a girl who barely knew how to use a printer. "And you," Alice continued. "Why are you so stiff?" "Stiff?" Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Yes, you walk straight, talk straight, even breathe straight. It's like someone hit the executive mode button and forgot to turn it off. You laugh so little, I bet you charge a tax on laughter." Thomas tried not to laugh, but failed. "I guess I just got used to it," he replied. "I could never. My life is a soap opera. If I walk too straight, I trip over my own emotions. Let's play a little game with those who only read the comments. Type pizza in the comments. Only those who made it this far will understand." Now let's get back to the story. Dinner continued with unexpected questions and honest answers. Alice talked about her childhood in the village, about her mentor, about her failed attempts at normal jobs, including the time she accidentally fried a flip-flop, thinking it was a steak. Thomas, in turn, spoke about the pressure of inheriting the family business, about growing up surrounded by expectations, and about how, deep down, he didn't even remember what his real dream was. "And what was it?" Alice asked, leaning forward. "I wanted to be a pianist," Thomas said without thinking. Alice blinked, surprised. But you look like you were born wearing a tie." "I know," he smiled slightly, "but I guess everyone has a hidden side." Alice smiled back. "I like this hidden side. Let's find it." After dinner, Thomas dropped Alice off at home, a small house lent by her mentor. Before going in, she turned around. "Thanks for dinner, boss. Tomorrow I can bring coccinelle for us to share." "I'll pass," he replied, but Alice was sure she saw a hidden smile. The next day, Alice showed up at the office with a box of coccinelles and a thermos full of tea. She walked into Thomas's office without knocking. Formalities weren't really her thing. "Coffee is old news. Now it's tea with coccinelle," she announced, holding out the tray. Thomas took a coccinelle like someone accepting a challenge. He bit into it, chewed, and laughed. "See?" Alice cheered. "I knew you liked living dangerously." Thomas's phone rang, interrupting the moment. He answered, and his expression turned serious. "It's about the international partnership contract. Looks like the meeting got moved up," he sighed. "I need to review this now." Alice picked up a thick folder from his desk, flipped through it, and widened her eyes. "Wow, this looks like the label of a giant medicine bottle." Thomas looked at her, then at the documents, then finally at the coccinelle in his hand. "Want to help?" he asked, half joking. "Me? Get in your way?" "Absolutely." She threw her backpack on the floor and sat beside him. The two spent the afternoon together, Thomas explaining complex terms and Alice translating them into normal people language. Between contracts, they laughed, fought over the last coccinelle, and debated whether chamomile tea was a valid corporate stress reliever. And just like that, without realizing it, Thomas started to enjoy Alice's presence more than he should. Meanwhile, in the company hallways, rumors were already flying. The clumsy girl who had barged into the company had become the topic of the day. Some thought she was a long-lost relative of Thomas. Others suspected she was some kind of undercover spy. The only certainty was that no one had ever seen Thomas Miller like this, laughing in the middle of the workday. And Alice? Well, she was just being herself. No filters, no disguises, no fear of being the misplaced puzzle piece, and maybe that was exactly what Thomas needed. The morning started like any other at Miller Enterprises, or almost. Alice arrived out of breath, dropping half the folders she was carrying, balancing a cup of passion fruit juice that wobbled as if it might explode, and greeting every person in the hallway as if they were childhood friends. "Good morning, beautiful and successful people," she sang, ignoring the confused looks. At her makeshift desk by the copier, Alice discovered someone had left an anonymous note stuck to her computer screen. "Alice, you're the most talked-about employee since that intern brought his mother to the corporate lunch. We're rooting for you, or betting against you, depends on the department." "Look at that, I'm famous!" Alice grinned, pinning the note onto her Epic Moments board. Before she could fully celebrate her meteoric rise as the Queen of Chaos, the main elevator doors opened, and a woman walked onto the floor as if stepping onto a red carpet. Impeccable stilettos, perfectly styled hair, and a perfume so expensive you could smell it from 3 meters away. The hallways fell silent. It was her. Natasha Montgomery, Thomas Miller's ex-fiancée, model, influencer, socialite, and owner of a drama history worthy of a primetime soap opera. "Why is everyone so tense?" Alice asked the intern next to her, who looked like he was holding his breath. "She's back," he whispered, as if talking about an urban legend. "Who? Casper the Ghost?" Alice blinked. "The boss's ex-fiancée?" the intern answered, with the energy of someone who knew the day's entertainment was secured. Alice followed everyone's gaze and saw Natasha marching straight toward Thomas's office. No knocking, no announcing herself, no asking for permission, because of course, who needs manners when you were once one step away from a millionaire wedding? Alice, being a professional-level busybody, grabbed her backpack and sneaked down the hallway, pretending to get coffee just so she could eavesdrop near the door. Inside, Natasha tossed her designer purse onto the desk and crossed her arms. "Thomas, darling, I thought it would be polite for us to meet again as 2 mature adults," she said, as if rehearsing for a courtroom drama. Thomas sighed, not looking up from his computer. "Natasha, we've already talked about this." "Talked? You gave me a no and disappeared." "That's not a conversation, that's running away," she shot back. Outside, Alice almost spilled her juice while trying to press her ear against the door. Nothing like top-tier gossip to start the workday right. "I didn't disappear, I just moved on with my life." Thomas finally looked up. "And you should do the same." "Of course, moving on, just like you are with." Natasha paused for dramatic effect. "That girl with the colorful backpack who looks like she just walked out of summer camp." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Alice?" "Alice." Natasha repeated the name like it was an insult. "Seriously, Thomas? You went from a magazine cover woman to an assistant who trips over her own shadow? First, she's not my assistant. Second, my personal life is none of your business," Thomas replied firmly. "Oh, but of course it is. You think the press won't love to hear that the great Thomas Miller is involved with someone completely outside his circle?" Natasha smirked. "I'm not involved with anyone," Thomas said. But the sentence came out more defensive than he intended. Outside, Alice was holding back a nervous laugh. She wasn't sure if she should feel offended or invite Natasha to watch her live performance of clumsy moments. Later, as Alice attempted to organize some folders and promptly dropped half of them, Thomas appeared next to her makeshift desk. "We need to talk," he said. Alice swallowed hard. "I swear I didn't touch the emergency button again. That was the wind." "It's not about that. It's about Natasha. The ex, the one who looks like she belongs on the cover of an expensive perfume ad. I saw her come in, and by chance, I may have overheard parts of the conversation. But just by chance, okay? I'm not a gossip. I'm just naturally curious. It's in my DNA." Alice blurted out without taking a breath. Thomas rubbed his temples. "She thinks there's something going on between us." Alice made a face. "Something going on? You and me?" "That's a good one." She burst out laughing, slapping her own leg. I can barely figure out the coffee machine, let alone get involved with the CEO. Thomas stayed silent, just watching her laughing fit, until Alice finally noticed. Wait, are you offended? Oh no, I didn't mean you're not dateable. It's just that, you're like a penguin in a fancy suit and I'm a guinea fowl with a colorful backpack. We come from different worlds. That didn't help at all, Thomas replied, though the corner of his mouth hinted at a smile. Throughout the week, Natasha showed up every single day with increasingly ridiculous excuses. First, to return a forgotten shirt. Then, to discuss an old contract. By the third day, she claimed she wanted to donate a vase to the office. Alice, noticing how persistent she was, decided to take a new approach. Every time Natasha appeared, Alice made up an important-sounding job title for herself. "Alice, can you grab the sales reports?" Thomas asked. But with Natasha in the room, Alice responded loudly, "Of course, boss. I'll grab the reports, review the international contracts, and coordinate the investor meeting with the Arab partners. Just a moment." Natasha narrowed her eyes. The next day, "Alice, can you take this to reception?" Thomas asked. And Alice, "Absolutely. Right after I finish reviewing the quarterly financial statements and checking the export charts for the European market." Natasha turned red. By Friday, Natasha had had enough. She called Alice for a private meeting at the building's cafe. Alice showed up armed with her backpack, a snack, and a whole lot of confidence. "Listen, girl," Natasha began, removing her sunglasses. "I don't know what you're trying to do, but it won't work. Thomas is out of your league. He doesn't go for real women?" Alice finished, taking a big bite of her snack. "Relax, Nat. I'm not trying anything. I'm just existing." "Well, stop existing near him," Natasha snapped. Alice wiped her fingers, smiling. "That's not up to me. He hired me, and if it makes you feel any better, I also thought I'd be fired on my second day. But look at that. Still here, still standing, still enjoying my snack." Natasha stomped away. Alice returned to her makeshift desk with one certainty: this office would never be the same again. And Thomas? Well, the more Natasha tried to push Alice away, the more he realized he didn't want her to leave. Somehow, the girl who tripped over cables and knocked over files was turning his world upside down. And strangely enough, he liked it. That Monday, Alice arrived as if she were preparing for battle. In her backpack, along with her usual snacks and her notebook of brilliant ideas, she brought a tray of homemade chocolates to build corporate alliances. It was a sophisticated strategy, or at least, it was in her mind. "Good morning, corporate world," she announced, handing out chocolates like the Easter Bunny. The employees, already used to her antics, accepted the treats with a mix of gratitude and fear for whatever she might do next. Meanwhile, in the executive offices, Natasha wasn't feeling so sweet. After her talk with Alice, she decided it was time to act. If Thomas liked chaos, she'd give him a dose of carefully planned chaos, the kind that could ruin reputations. By mid-morning, Alice was called into Thomas's office. She walked in as usual, without knocking, her coat tangled in her backpack strap, and knocking over the secretary's water cup on the way in. "You called, boss?" She smiled. Thomas sighed. At this point, it was almost endearing. "We need to review these reports before this afternoon's meeting," he said, pointing to a pile of documents. Alice pulled up a chair beside him, but in her excitement, she sat down so hard that one of the wheels slipped, sending her sliding backward like she was surfing on the carpet. "I'm fine," she shouted, already scrambling back into position. Thomas pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to suppress a laugh. "How do you manage to turn every simple task into a comedy scene?" "Natural talent," she shrugged, grabbing the reports. While the two worked together, Natasha put her plan into action. Using her internal connections, she spread the rumor among some executives that Alice had joined the company with ulterior motives, that she was getting close to Thomas out of self-interest, using the old master's name as an excuse. The rumor spread fast. By lunchtime, people were already saying Alice was a gold digger and that Thomas was falling right into the trap of the clumsy but innocent-looking girl. Alice, unaware of the gossip, was too busy trying to understand what consolidated cash flow meant and why there were so many complicated words just to say how much money came in and went out. "Thomas, can I make a suggestion?" she asked. "That scares me, but go ahead." "Why don't you guys write these reports in normal people's language? Instead of analysis of liabilities and assets, it could just be how much we spent on useful stuff and how much we wasted on nonsense. Oddly enough, that makes sense, Thomas admitted, amused. Their growing closeness was becoming more and more obvious. Thomas, who used to stay locked in his office, now insisted on reviewing everything alongside Alice, even knowing she would turn every meeting into an improv show. But as they grew closer, the walls around her were closing in. The next afternoon, Alice was called into the compliance department, a word she could barely pronounce. "Alice Silva, correct?" asked a woman with square glasses and a serious look. "That's me. Employee of the month for tripping over things and champion of spilling coffee." "We are investigating an anonymous complaint," the woman continued, ignoring the humor. "Someone claimed that you used privileged information and personal connections to get your job with the intention of pursuing a relationship with the CEO. Alice blinked, confused. "Excuse me, what?" "We have an email sent to the committee stating that your hiring was irregular and that there are signs of, let's say, romantic interests involved." Alice let out a nervous laugh. "This has to be a joke. Look at me. I can barely operate the coffee machine, let alone manipulate a billionaire." The woman didn't laugh. "We need you to fill out this form explaining your background and how you got this position." Alice took the paper and left the room, feeling her heartbeat in her ears. "Who would do something like this?" she muttered as she walked back to her desk. Thomas found out about the complaint minutes later. By the time Alice entered his office to hand over the documents, he was already waiting. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked bluntly. I barely had time to process it." Alice dropped her bag on the floor. "I thought it was some kind of HR prank, like a psychological endurance test." "This isn't a joke. Someone is trying to take you down." Thomas crossed his arms. "And I'd bet my entire stash of cheese puffs I know exactly who it is," Alice grumbled. Thomas closed his eyes for a second. "Natasha." "Bingo," Alice pointed at him. "She's trying to turn me into the villain of this corporate soap opera." Thomas stayed silent for a few seconds. A part of him knew Natasha was capable of anything, but another part of him knew that if he didn't step in, Alice wouldn't survive the cutthroat office politics. "Come with me," he said, grabbing his suit jacket. "Where are we going?" "To fix this the right way." Thomas and Alice stormed into a board meeting where Natasha was conveniently present. Alice walked in with confidence but immediately tripped over the carpet, caught by Thomas at the last second. "I've mastered the art of the dramatic entrance," she whispered. Thomas faced the board members. "Who received the complaint about Alice?" he asked. The compliance officer raised her hand. "I did." "Great. Now I want to make it official right here. I was the one who hired Alice. No hidden agendas, no secret plans. I asked her to work here because she brings something no one else does: honesty and humanity." Alice, who had been nervously sipping water, choked. "I what?" she coughed. "That's right. Since you got here, you're the only person who talks to me like I'm a normal human being. That's rare around here." Thomas continued. The board members murmured among themselves. Natasha crossed her arms, her face burning with anger. "And lastly," Thomas looked straight at Natasha, "if anyone here thinks they can use gossip to ruin an innocent employee's reputation, they are deeply mistaken." Alice gave Natasha a little wave, as if saying, "Kisses." After the meeting, Thomas and Alice went back to his office. Alice collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. "You defended me. That was kinda epic," she said. "I just told the truth," Thomas replied. Alice looked at him, a little shy. "And that part about me being honest and human, was that a compliment or just a nice way of saying I'm a walking disaster?" "A little of both," he smiled. Alice threw a pillow at him. "I'll take it." That night, Thomas offered Alice a ride, but instead of dropping her off at home, he stopped at a busy park. "What are we doing here?" Alice asked. "You said you wanted to help me remember who I am, outside the office. So, here we are." Alice pulled Thomas toward a popcorn stand. "I want to see the most feared CEO in town buying popcorn with grated cheese," she challenged. Thomas accepted. Between popcorn, cotton candy, and a paddle boat ride, the two of them forgot for a few hours about titles, gossip, and corporate chaos. It was there, under the park's simple lights, that Alice realized Thomas Miller, the cold billionaire, was just a man who had never had the chance to be normal. And Thomas realized Alice wasn't a storm to be controlled. She was exactly the kind of storm he needed to wake up, and maybe, just maybe, neither of them wanted to escape from it. The next morning, Alice arrived at the office carrying a box so big it looked like she was moving in. The box was bigger than she was, and every step was a balancing act. "Need some help?" the security guard at the door asked. "No, thanks. Just carrying my dignity and a few other things," Alice replied, already tripping over the reception rug and spilling everything onto the floor. Inside the box were a portable coffee maker, because she still didn't trust the office machine, a cheese bread-shaped pillow, and a small pink fan. The receptionist sighed, already used to the scene. "And she continues her mission to turn the executive floor into a college dorm," she murmured. While Alice decorated her desk with her pillow and fan, Natasha, on the other side of the building, was fine-tuning her new plan. If the rumor hadn't taken Alice down, she needed something bigger. Something that would catch Alice off guard and leave Thomas with no way out. Natasha didn't play to lose. At lunchtime, Thomas invited Alice to eat out. Except, in his mind, eating out meant a restaurant with glass walls, waiters with French accents, and live piano music. Alice stepped inside and immediately felt out of place. The chairs looked like works of art. The glasses were so polished you could fix your hair in their reflection, and the water came with a floating slice of lemon, like a spa for cups. "I should have packed a lunch," Alice whispered. "Relax. No one is judging you," Thomas assured her. But Alice was already nervous. She tried to pull out her chair and ended up dropping her napkin on the floor. Then, she attempted to order in French but mixed up words and accidentally asked for a roasted duck that tastes like a chair. "It's impressive how you turn any lunch into entertainment," Thomas said, amused. Alice laughed, but noticed that nearby tables were watching them with too much curiosity. "Why does it feel like we're a spectacle?" she asked. Thomas looked around and sighed. "Because we are. Ever since that rumor started, everyone wants to know who the mysterious girl is who supposedly won me over." Alice almost choked on her lemon water. "Won you over? I haven't even won over my own cat. He only tolerates me because I feed him." Thomas actually laughed. "Relax, let's just have lunch. The world can wait." While they ate, Natasha made her final move. She convinced a journalist friend to catch Thomas and Alice's lunch and turn it into a news story. With a few twisted words and carefully chosen angles, the gossip site would publish, "Cold CEO tamed by mysterious girl. Who is the new woman in Thomas Miller's heart?" Alice had no idea she was about to go viral. Again. That afternoon, when they returned to the office, Alice found her face plastered on screens and phones everywhere. Employees whispered, exchanged links, and stifled giggles. "What's going on?" she asked the office gossip intern. "You're trending, boss," he said, showing her his phone. There she was, caught mid-bite with her fork in the air, in what had to be the worst-timed photo ever. Next to her, Thomas was actually smiling, a rare sight, and the headline gleamed, "The clumsy girl who won over the coldest CEO in town." "I'm going to be sick," Alice muttered. Thomas saw the article at almost the same time. He walked into Alice's office with his phone in hand, his expression a mix of irritation and second-hand embarrassment. "Alice, what is this?" "I swear I had nothing to do with this." She raised her hands. "I don't even have decent internet at home. My Wi-Fi is so bad that a carrier pigeon would be faster." Thomas threw his phone onto the desk. "This is Natasha's doing." "Of course it is. She probably has an entire album called Foolproof Plans to Ruin Alice." "And this is just volume 1, Alice muttered, rubbing her temples. "I'm going to fix this," Thomas said. But before he could leave, Alice grabbed his arm. "Wait, if we try to deny it, people will think we're hiding something. You know how the internet is. The more you deny, the more they believe it." Thomas looked at her. "So what do you suggest?" Alice gave a mischievous smile. "We do the opposite. We laugh about it. We act like it's the most ridiculous thing in the world. Because it is." Thomas crossed his arms, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "Give me your phone." Alice took his phone, opened the camera app, and snapped a selfie of the two of them making silly faces. "I'm posting this on my profile," she explained. With the caption, "A cold CEO and his clumsy employee taking over your timeline with this delicious gossip." Thomas looked skeptical at first, then chuckled. "This might actually work." "Trust me, boss." Alice winked. Within an hour, Alice's post went more viral than the original article. People loved her honesty and humor, and soon the public was rooting for this unlikely duo, even though they weren't actually a couple. At least, not officially. By the end of the day, Thomas and Alice stayed late reviewing documents, or trying to, since Alice dropped the stapler 3 times and accidentally turned an important report into a paper airplane. "I've never seen anyone so dedicated to being a disaster," Thomas commented. "It's a gift," Alice replied, tossing a paper airplane that hit him right in the forehead. They laughed, and the laughter lingered longer than it should have. At some point, silence took over. Alice was too close. Thomas was staring too much, and suddenly it wasn't so funny anymore. Thomas leaned in slightly, as if he was about to say something. Alice held her breath. The space between them shrank, until Alice's phone rang loudly with a blaring ringtone. "Sorry, it's my mom. If I don't pick up, she thinks I've been kidnapped." Alice grabbed her phone, feeling both relieved and frustrated. Thomas pulled back, adjusting his tie. "No problem." But they both knew something almost happened. Outside the office, Natasha watched from the window, frustration all over her face. No matter what she did, she couldn't push Alice away. Worse yet, the more she tried, the closer Thomas got to that chaotic girl. "If you two think you're getting a happy ending, you're very mistaken," Natasha muttered to herself. But inside, Alice and Thomas were too busy just being themselves to notice. Between clumsy moments, silly expressions, and flying reports, they were creating something Natasha had no control over, a real connection. And this was just the beginning. Alice arrived at the office determined to have a peaceful day. Or, as peaceful as possible, considering her track record of accidental chaos. She brought a packed lunch, a bag of sour candies, and a roll of tape to mark off her office space, since her desk was still just that improvised spot near the copier. "No one's ruining my mood today," she mumbled, pressing the tape to the floor like she was claiming her territory. Of course, that wasn't going to last. By mid-morning, Thomas appeared at her desk with that familiar look, the one teachers had right before handing back a test covered in red ink. "Something wrong, boss?" she asked, flashing a nervous smile. "Come with me," he said. Alice followed Thomas to the most private meeting room in the office. As soon as she stepped inside, he shut the door and she froze. "Oh wow, if I'd known, I would have brought my toothpaste." "Always wanted to have a bright smile for a firing," she joked. "It's not that," Thomas said, but he didn't laugh. He actually looked concerned. "Then what is it?" Alice crossed her arms. "We need to talk about us." Alice's eyes widened. "Us? What us? The dynamic duo of executive disasters? What about us?" Thomas ran a hand through his hair, visibly uneasy. "Since you got here, my entire routine has been turned upside down. I used to know exactly how each day would end, and now I don't even know how each hour will go." "Is that a bad thing?" Alice bit her lip. "No, it's strange, but not bad." Alice was quiet for a few seconds, processing. "Thomas, are you saying you like me?" Like me?" she asked, blinking fast. "I'm saying you make me feel things I haven't felt in a long time," he admitted honestly. Alice was silent for exactly 3 seconds. "I won the bet," she suddenly yelled. "What bet?" Thomas jumped. "I bet myself that deep down, you were actually a human with feelings and that your whole corporate robot thing was just an act." "I knew it. I knew it." Thomas laughed, shaking his head. "You're completely insane." "Insane is going through life without laughing, Thomas Miller. Welcome to the fun side." He looked at her differently. That clumsy girl, carrying a backpack bigger than herself and with no filter when speaking her mind, had somehow invaded his life, and now it seemed impossible to imagine his routine without her. "So, does this mean you like me too?" Thomas asked, half joking, half serious. Alice scratched the back of her neck. "Well, I do like you. But my love life is like an all-you-can-eat pizza buffet. Seems like a great idea at first, but always ends with a stomachache." "We could give it a try," Thomas suggested, stepping closer. Alice felt her face heat up. "Try what?" "A real date. No contracts, no snacks in the middle of reports. Just the two of us." Alice turned red. But before she could respond, the office door swung open. "Oh, am I interrupting something?" It was Natasha, wearing her usual sly smile. Alice nearly jumped. "No, of course not. We were just rehearsing a corporate training skit. I was the unhappy customer, and he was the salesperson trying to convince me to buy a toaster." "Training stuff," Alice made up on the spot. Thomas closed his eyes for a second, holding back a sigh. Natasha, what do you need? I came to bring this. She held up an envelope. It's about the merger contract with the European company. We need to review it before tomorrow's meeting. Thomas took the envelope, and Natasha gave Alice one last glance before leaving. She's like a final boss in a video game. Alice whispered, the further we get, the harder she becomes. That afternoon, Thomas had an off-site meeting, and Alice was left in charge of reviewing the presentation. With no direct supervision, she put on a low-volume playlist, opened a soda, and started creating graphs with titles like Money Coming In, Yay, and Money Going Out, Ouch My Wallet. Meanwhile, Natasha was working on a different plan. With the help of a bribed IT employee who traded his loyalty for concert tickets, she gained access to Alice's computer and sent from her email a disastrous message to the European supplier. The email was full of negotiation mistakes, ridiculous promises, and even a clause offering personalized gifts and relaxing massages to seal the deal. The plan was simple. Blame Alice for a so-called diplomatic incident, ruin her reputation, and prove she was unfit for any position, especially Thomas's heart. By the end of the day, Thomas returned from his meeting to find chaos. The legal department was gathered in his office, reviewing the email. The international relations director was in tears, and the European supplier was threatening to break off negotiations. What happened? Thomas asked. Alice, someone shouted. She sent a completely inappropriate email to our biggest supplier. Thomas frowned. That doesn't make sense. Alice barely knows how to format an email, let alone handle an international negotiation. Alice walked in, chewing gum and carrying a bag of cheese bread. Sensing the tense atmosphere, she swallowed hard. Oh, bad timing? She asked. Thomas handed her the email. Did you send this? Alice read it and burst out laughing. Look, I might be a little crazy, but I'm not stupid. I don't even know what logistics reciprocity clause means. This is a setup. Natasha stepped forward, feigning concern. What an unfortunate situation, isn't it? I did warn you that bringing someone inexperienced into the company could lead to this. Alice narrowed her eyes. Oh, Nat, you've got some venom on your hands there. Thomas looked from Alice to Natasha, and something clicked in his mind. He knew his ex-fiancée's tactics all too well. Without another word, he picked up the phone and called the IT department. I want to know who accessed Alice's email today, he said. Minutes later, the answer came back. The access was from a remote computer, one registered to Natasha. Dear Natasha, Thomas said, his voice dangerously calm, we have a problem. She tried to argue, but Thomas didn't give her the chance. He asked her to leave the building immediately. Alice, watching everything unfold with a mix of shock and pride, couldn't help herself. Thomas Miller, taking down corporate villains with just one phone call. I applaud you. Natasha stormed out, but before leaving, she threw out one last warning. This isn't over. At the end of the day, Alice and Thomas went up to the office terrace for some fresh air. They sat side by side on the ground, sharing the bag of cheese bread. You defended me. Again, Alice said, and I'll keep defending you, whenever needed. Thomas replied. Alice smiled. You know, I thought you were just some stiff guy in a suit who didn't know how to smile, but you're actually nice, a little rigid, but nice. And I thought you were just a clumsy intruder, but you're one of a kind. Thomas looked at her in a way that made Alice forget how to chew. Silence fell between them. A comfortable silence. Until Alice turned to him. I've never had a boss stand up for me before. I just wanted to say thank you. Thomas stepped closer, and I've never had an employee remind me how good it feels to laugh. They were so close that Alice could smell his cologne, and when Thomas leaned in, she closed her eyes. This time, no one interrupted. It was a brief kiss, sweet, a little awkward, but absolutely perfect. Does this count as a salary bonus? Alice asked, laughing. Consider it part of your training, Thomas replied with a smile. And there, on the rooftop under the city sky, Alice and Thomas discovered that chaos and order could in fact work together. The next day, Alice arrived at the office with a smile that seemed glued to her face. The rooftop kiss? Impossible to forget. She replayed it about 30 times in her head before falling asleep, and another 15 while brushing her teeth. Good morning, beautiful building. Good morning, wall. Good morning, coffee maker that hates me. she sang as she practically floated down the hallways like the lead in a musical. But as always, Alice's life wasn't just made of magical, romantic moments. The moment she stepped into Thomas's office, she nearly knocked over the glass door and came face to face with Mr. Miller Sr. "Good morning, Mr. Miller." Alice tried to correct herself, but it was too late. Thomas's father, a gray-haired man with the expression of someone who had never laughed at a joke in his life, looked at her like a scanner, analyzing every inch of her outfit, her hair, and her backpack full of colorful keychains. "Who is this?" he asked, as if Alice were some newly discovered corporate species. "Father, this is Alice," Thomas answered calmly. "She works for me." Alice stepped forward, enthusiastically offering her hand. "Nice to meet you. Alice Disaster Silva, ninja messenger, expert in tripping over things and currently your son's girlfriend in training." Thomas's eyes widened. He coughed, tried to recover, but the damage was done. "Girlfriend?" Mr. Miller's tone of disbelief could probably be heard on the floor below. "She's exaggerating," Thomas tried to clarify. "I'm not exaggerating. We kissed yesterday, on the rooftop, under the moon, with the neighbor's pagode music playing in the background. It was beautiful," Alice added, grinning. Thomas's father went pale. "Thomas, I need to talk to you. Now. Alone." Alice raised her hand. "I can leave. No problem. I'll just go print some papers and maybe accidentally blow up the copier." "No big deal." She took 2 steps back, bumped into the doorframe, and disappeared down the hall. Alice spent the entire morning avoiding Thomas's office, imagining the lecture he was probably getting. Meanwhile, Thomas was facing a full-on interrogation. "Explain this to me, Thomas," his father began, pointing at the door Alice had walked through. "Who is that girl?" "I already told you. She works here." "And why exactly are you kissing employees on the rooftop?" "Because I like her," Thomas answered, plainly. His father rubbed his temples, as if hearing complete nonsense. "Thomas, do you realize what this could cause? The shareholders, the press, the rumors." "I know, but for the first time in years, I don't care," Thomas said. His father looked at him like he had just confessed he was leaving everything behind to sell jewelry on the beach. "Do you have any idea of the responsibility you carry? Your image, your reputation? And what's the point of having a perfect reputation if I feel empty?" Thomas countered, firmly. His father was speechless. Not because he agreed, but because he had never seen his son so determined or so emotional. Meanwhile, completely unaware of the epic discussion she had set off, Alice decided to hide in the cafeteria. With her tray of macaroni and sausage, she tried to stay under the radar, but quickly became the center of attention when the marketing team started asking questions. "So, it's official? You and the boss?" the social media manager asked, practically glowing with curiosity. "We're testing things out," Alice replied. "It's like an emotional test drive. It could work, or it could crash straight into the wall of reality." The IT intern sighed. "This is the biggest plot twist in this office since they changed the coffee brand." Alice laughed, but deep down, she felt that familiar nervous flutter in her stomach. If everyone knew, that meant the pressure was only going to grow, and she wasn't exactly an expert in relationships, let alone dating billionaire bosses. Later, Thomas called Alice to his office for a talk. The moment she walked in, she could tell he was tense. "Everything okay?" she asked, already biting into a cookie out of nervousness. "My father didn't take the idea of us very well." "Oh, I figured," she shrugged. "My mom would freak out too if I told her I was dating a billionaire. She'd tell me to ask for an emotional loan." Thomas laughed, even though he tried not to. The problem is, in his view, workplace relationships always end in scandal. "Oh, sure, because I'm known for scandals. One time I almost caused one at the grocery store, but that was because I knocked over a pyramid of canned corn. Not sure if that counts." Thomas took her hand. "I just want to make sure you're ready for this." Alice took a deep breath. "Thomas, I've never prepared for anything in my life. I stumble, I get up, I laugh, and I move on. If this works out, great. If it doesn't, at least I'll have a good story to tell at the next family bingo night." Thomas smiled. "That's exactly why I like you so much." While the couple was figuring things out, Natasha hadn't given up. After being kicked out of the company, she started reaching out to journalists, suggesting that Alice was a professional scammer, and that her romance with Thomas was just a strategy to climb the corporate ladder. That night, a sensationalist article appeared. Corporate Cinderella, clumsy girl or master manipulator. Alice saw the news while brushing her teeth and almost swallowed her toothpaste. "Can I not have a moment of peace?" she yelled at her phone screen. The next morning, Thomas called a surprise press conference. All the major media outlets showed up, expecting some corporate announcement. Instead, they found Thomas standing next to Alice, holding her hand. "I want to make something clear," Thomas began. "Yes, we're getting to know each other. And yes, she works at the company. But there's no hidden agenda, no scheme, no manipulation." Alice took the microphone. "I can't even manipulate my toaster at home. The other day, I almost blew up my microwave because I put aluminum foil in it. Do you really think I could manipulate a CEO? He's more stubborn than a cat on bath day." The reporters laughed. Thomas squeezed her hand. "I like Alice because she is exactly who she is. Clumsiness, snacks, and all." Alice smiled. "And I like him because he lets me be myself," she added. The press conference ended with more smiles than questions. And for the first time, Thomas Miller didn't seem to care what the media thought. Later, in the parking lot, as Alice struggled to get into the car without getting her skirt caught in the door, Thomas grabbed her arm. "Alice, yes? I'm taking this seriously." She looked at him surprised. "Me too. But my version of serious is a little messy. My life plan has always been to just make it through the next day. Now there's you." Thomas brushed a stray strand of hair from her face with his thumb. "We'll figure it out. Together." Alice smiled. "Together. But if things go south, I want the office coffee machine. Deal." They laughed, and then they kissed. This time, no interruptions, no prying eyes, just the two of them, in a quiet corner of the parking lot, sealing a deal far more important than any corporate contract. And Natasha? Well, she watched from a distance, fuming inside her car. "This isn't over," she muttered, digging her heel into the floor mat. But for Thomas and Alice, only one thing mattered. They were finally on the same side of the chaos. Alice arrived extra early the next morning, way too early for her usual standards. She was so excited that she walked through the lobby with a goofy smile and even greeted the decorative statue in the hall. "Good morning, dear building. Good morning, revolving door. Nothing can stop me today." She stepped into the elevator humming and pressed the executive floor button with all the confidence in the world. But that confidence lasted exactly 3 seconds, until she walked straight into Thomas and his father, Mr. Miller, in the hallway. "Uh-oh." Alice froze mid-step, nearly tripping over her own foot. "I don't want to interrupt an important father-son billionaire meeting, so I'll just blend in over here behind this plant." She tried to hide behind a tiny decorative plant. "Alice, come in," Thomas called. "Are you sure? I'm super busy with some really important tasks like color-coding paper clips and coming up with names for the office printers." Thomas gave a small smile, but his expression was more serious than usual. Alice stepped inside, and the tension in the air was so thick it felt like someone had sprayed stress into the room like an air freshener. "Here's the thing," Thomas started. "There's something you need to know." "Oh no, I swear the cheese bread pillow I brought isn't contraband. It was a gift from my aunt." "It's not about that." Thomas took a deep breath. "It's about my past, and about Natasha." Alice sat on the armrest of the couch, already sensing this was going to be big. "Oh, right, the revenge Barbie. Go ahead, I'm ready." "When Natasha and I got engaged, our marriage wasn't just about love. It was an agreement between families. My father and hers had a business merger contract that depended on our union." Alice's eyes widened. "Wait, am I in a love triangle or a Turkish soap opera? I never truly loved Natasha, and she knew it. But our parents pushed us so hard that I ended up giving in. Until the day I realized I couldn't spend the rest of my life stuck in something like that." "So you broke up with her?" Alice finished his sentence. On the day of the wedding rehearsal, Thomas confirmed with no pride in his voice. Alice nearly choked on her own saliva. "My God, you practically left her at the altar?" "I know, it was cowardly. I should have ended it sooner. But the truth is, during the entire engagement, I felt something was off. I just didn't know what, until I met you." Alice was speechless for a few seconds. "So she has a reason to hate me, huh?" she joked. "I'm the living symbol of the emotional freedom she never had. I just wanted you to know the whole story. I don't want you to hear it from someone else." Alice stayed quiet. It was a lot to process over breakfast. But deep down, she knew Thomas wasn't the kind of man who would hurt someone on purpose. And if life had taught her anything, it was that everyone has a messy past. Let's have some fun with those who only read the comments. Type Coca-Cola in the comments. Only those who made it this far will get it. Now, let's get back to the story. Okay. Take a deep breath, Thomas. I'm not running away. Just know that if someone tries to throw stale rice at me on the street because of this, I'll fight back with frozen cheese bread, she said with a small smile. Thomas took her hand. You're crazy, and I love that. But the ghosts of the past aren't so easy to bury. Later that morning, an anonymous email was sent to the company's top shareholders, with attachments. And who was in the photos? Thomas and Natasha, together at dinners, events, and intimate moments from their former engagement. The message suggested that Thomas was just using Alice to clean up his public image and that, deep down, he and Natasha still had business ties, maybe even more than that. The office atmosphere got tense. Alice, who was just trying to figure out how to use the coffee machine without causing a short circuit, noticed the stares. The whispers in the hallways grew louder. Did I become a meme again? She asked the marketing intern. Not exactly a meme, he replied, showing her the email. Alice read it and felt her stomach drop. It was like someone had poured a bucket of cold water over the happiness she had been feeling. Thomas found out soon after. He walked into her office, but Alice raised her hand. Before you say anything, I just have one question. Is this true? No, Natasha and I have no involvement, and I would never use you to fix my image, he said firmly. I want to believe you, Alice sighed. But honestly, I've never been good at trusting people. My last relationship was with a pizza delivery guy who promised to take me out to dinner and disappeared with my change. I'm not him, Thomas replied. Alice crossed her arms. Prove it. At lunchtime, Thomas called a company-wide meeting, with everyone, from the CEO to the cleaning staff. Alice sat in the back, hugging her backpack. Thomas stepped onto the makeshift stage in the cafeteria and took a deep breath. I need to clear something up, he began. Yes, Natasha and I were engaged, and yes, I ended it in a way I'm not proud of. But that's in the past, employees whispered among themselves. What's happening now between Alice and me is completely different. There's no business deal, no contract, no manipulation, just two people trying to figure something out together. Alice's eyes widened. She hadn't expected a public statement like that. And if anyone here or outside this company thinks they can tear us apart with rumors or threats, know this, it won't work. Alice has brought something to this company that no financial report ever has: humanity. The employees clapped, first hesitantly, then louder. Alice didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she did both. That afternoon, Alice and Thomas were alone in his office. Thank you, she said. For what? For not hiding me. For not turning me into some corporate secret. For just being you. Thomas stepped closer. I'm just a guy trying to get it right, with the most clumsy, amazing woman I've ever met. They kissed again, this time tasting victory. And also cheese bread, because Alice had one hidden in her jacket pocket. But Natasha wasn't done playing her game yet. While the couple enjoyed their moment, Natasha had one last card to play. An old, forgotten clause in the merger contract between the Miller and Montgomery families. A clause that stated that if Thomas broke off the engagement, his family's company would have to pay a massive fine. And Natasha was ready to collect that debt. Not for money, but for revenge. By the end of the day, Thomas received a court summons. Alice found the opened envelope on his desk, and after reading it, nearly fell over. Is this serious? She asked. It is. If I don't marry Natasha, the company could face a long and slow lawsuit that might affect all the employees. Alice felt a knot in her chest. So, what are you going to do? Thomas looked at her. I don't know yet, but one thing is certain, I'm not going to lose you. Alice tried to smile, but this time the humor didn't come, because for the first time she realized that maybe love wasn't enough to win every battle. But if there was one thing Alice had learned in life, it was that you don't take down a clumsy girl that easily, especially one in love. Alice left Thomas's office after reading that summons and went straight to the bathroom. She needed to breathe, she needed to think. She needed a snack, because no one thinks straight on an empty stomach. Sitting on the toilet lid, she pulled a squished snack out of her backpack and started eating, staring at the ceiling as if waiting for divine answers. "Okay, Alice, let's organize this emotional mess into bullet points," she said to herself. "First, you're in love. That's obvious. Second, the man you like might have to marry his evil ex because of some ancient contract. Third, you're just a girl with a colorful backpack and no experience in corporate drama." She took another bite. "And fourth, this is not going to end like this, even if I have to crash another fancy party or pretend to be a waitress again." Here, Alice took a deep breath, brushed the crumbs off her pants, and went back to the office with the determined look of someone who had no idea what she was about to do, but knew it was going to be something crazy. Thomas, on the other hand, was drowning in crisis meetings with lawyers, shareholders, and consultants. The atmosphere felt like an executive funeral. Every decision seemed bad. Paying the fine would be disastrous for the company, and marrying Natasha would be disastrous for the rest of his life. Alice walked into the meeting room as usual without knocking. "I can fix this," she announced. Thomas looked at her, exhausted. "Alice, now is not the time for one of your wild ideas." "Wrong. Now is exactly the time, because what you're discussing here is logic, contracts, clauses, and money. But this fight isn't about that. It's about wounded pride. And wounded pride can only be fixed with something much more powerful: public humiliation." The lawyers exchanged glances, like they were witnessing a supernatural event in the middle of the office. "Alice," Thomas tried to interrupt. "Trust me. You hired me for my chaos, remember? It's time to use that to our advantage." Thomas sighed. He knew that trying to stop Alice was like trying to stop an avalanche with an umbrella. "What exactly do you have in mind? Something so epic, so chaotic, and so humiliating that Natasha will never want to look at us again." That night, Alice called an emergency meeting in the Miller Enterprises employee group chat. The group, usually used for debating where to order pizza, turned into the intelligence center for Operation Takedown Natasha. "Guys, do you trust me?" Alice asked. The response was a mix of no and explosion emojis. "Perfect. Now help me. I need videos, audio recordings, anything embarrassing Natasha has ever done or said while working here. Meetings, parties, behind the scenes, everything counts." In less than half an hour, Alice had a full dossier. Natasha complaining about the food at the company holiday party. Natasha calling a senior director a dinosaur in a suit. Natasha tripping over her own skirt and spilling champagne all over her designer bag. And the most precious find, an audio recording where she laughed and admitted that she only agreed to the engagement with Thomas because she wanted to be on the cover of a magazine. Done. Alice grinned, devilishly. Now we just have to release it at the right moment. The next day, Thomas and Natasha had a mediation meeting with lawyers and representatives from both families to discuss the contract clause. Alice showed up in the middle of it, wearing a cap and sunglasses, like some kind of low-budget spy. "What is she doing here?" Natasha huffed. "I'm here for moral support and snack delivery," Alice replied, holding up a bag. The lawyers started reading the problematic clause, and Natasha was already smiling like she was about to win the Corporate Villain of the Year award. Until Alice raised her hand. "Excuse me, can I show something real quick?" she asked. "Alice," Thomas warned. But it was too late. Alice connected her phone to the big screen and started playing the videos and audio clips she had collected. First came Natasha, stumbling. Then Natasha, complaining about the food. And finally, the most valuable recording of all, where she admitted she never loved Thomas and was only after status. The silence in the room was so heavy you could hear Natasha's anxious breathing. This is an invasion of privacy," Natasha shouted. "That's funny," Alice crossed her arms. "Because you spreading rumors about me wasn't, right? Double standards, sweetheart." The Miller family lawyers, who had secretly disliked Natasha for years, tried to hide their smiles. "I think this changes the negotiation," one of them said. Thomas grabbed Alice's arm and led her out of the room. "I can't believe you did that." "I know, it was a little underhanded. But look, it worked. Now she has no credibility to pressure anyone. If she takes this to the press, she's the one who'll end up looking bad." Thomas stared at Alice, unsure whether to laugh, argue, or kiss her. "You're unbelievable. And you knew that from day one, so really, it's your fault." Alice shrugged. Thomas pulled her in by the waist and kissed her right there, in the middle of the hallway, in front of all the lawyers, employees, and even a cafe worker pushing a snack cart. "Was that a scene from a movie?" the cafe worker asked. "No, just another normal day in my life with Alice," Thomas replied with a smile. With the scandal unfolding, Natasha disappeared for a while. The contract clause was reevaluated, considering that the marriage had never been a legitimate requirement, just an exaggerated interpretation by their families. And just like that, the million-dollar problem vanished. Alice became an office hero. The company's group chat changed its name to Alice's Guardians, and she even received a special badge with the title Queen of Corporate Chaos. That night, Thomas and Alice went out to dinner. No fancy restaurants. They chose a food truck selling pastries and sugarcane juice. "I still can't believe you solved a legal issue with gossip videos," Thomas said, laughing. "I told you, I specialize in chaos. It's my signature move," Alice replied. Thomas took her hand. "So what's your next brilliant plan?" Alice thought for a second. "Maybe moving in with you. I know it's soon, but—" "Yes," Thomas answered before she could even finish. "Really? Just like that? Alice, after everything we've been through, do you really think I'd let you slip away?" Alice smiled. "All right, but on one condition." "What is it?" "We get a hammock for the living room and a snack machine. I have standards." "Deal." They toasted with sugarcane juice and kissed under the city lights, while a nearby food stand played a romantic 90s song. Because in the end, their love was exactly that, a mix of chaos, humor, and honesty. And honestly, it was perfect just the way it was. The days following Natasha's scandal were, for the first time, peaceful at Miller Enterprises, or at least as peaceful as things could be with Alice around. Now officially the queen of corporate chaos, Alice walked through the office like a celebrity. Employees greeted her with smiles, left small gifts on her desk, and in some cases even asked for advice on how to solve workplace issues using embarrassing videos. And Thomas? Well, he had never been this relaxed, or this happy. "I didn't know it was possible to laugh this much at work," he commented while Alice struggled to get a stuck snack from the vending machine. "Laughter is important, Thomas. A happy workplace is the difference between success and indigestion," she replied, tapping the machine's glass. But over the next few days, something changed in Thomas. Every time he looked at Alice, he felt a tightness in his chest, a good kind of nervous. Like he was about to make the most important decision of his life, and this time, it was entirely his choice. That's when he knew it was time to propose to Alice. But a regular proposal wouldn't do. That wasn't Alice's style. Thomas spent 3 sleepless nights trying to come up with the perfect plan. He considered a fancy dinner, fireworks, a giant billboard message, but none of it felt right. Then he remembered something. One morning, Alice arrived at the office and found a trail of colorful sticky notes leading down the hallway. Each note had a little message. For the girl who turned the conference room into a dance floor. For the employee who made the coffee station the official gossip hub. For the only person who knocked over 2 office lamps and still got promoted. Alice picked up each note, laughing and growing more curious with every step. The trail ended at Thomas's office door. When she opened it, she gasped. The entire room was filled with snacks. Trays and trays of her favorite treats, forming a giant heart on his desk. "Is this a declaration of love or an attempt to fatten me up so I can't run away?" she asked, her eyes shining. Thomas was wearing a suit, but no tie, with that goofy smile only she could bring out of him. "Both," he replied. Then he got down on one knee, right in the middle of the coccinelles. Alice's eyes widened. "You've got to be kidding." "I've never been more serious. Alice Silva, you came into my life like a clumsy hurricane, barged into my company, messed up my office, spilled half my coffee supply, and still managed to make me happier than I ever imagined." Alice already had tears in her eyes while eating another coccina. "You taught me that life doesn't have to be controlled, planned, and perfect all the time. Sometimes it's funny, chaotic, and full of coccina crumbs on the floor." He opened a small box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a tiny colorful stone in the center, a stone Thomas said matched Alice's backpack. "Will you marry me?" he asked, nervous. Alice jumped into the middle of the coccinelles and hugged Thomas so tight she almost knocked him over. 1,000 times yes, but only if you promise there'll be more of these at the wedding." "Deal," he laughed, kissing her. The wedding was planned in record time because Alice wanted something simple and fun. No red carpets or designer dresses. She wanted upbeat music, a two-tier cake filled with dulce de leche, and a dance floor where even Thomas's great-aunt could try a few moves. The ceremony was outdoors, in a garden filled with colorful lights and tables decorated with mixed flowers, because Alice could never pick just one. Thomas, in a light-colored suit and a love-struck smile, waited at the altar. Alice walked down the aisle to an acoustic version of a pagode song, her special request. Her dress was light, with simple lace, and a hem she adjusted herself with hot glue, because every seamstress in town already knew her reputation with sewing machines. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the way Thomas looked at Alice, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And the way Alice looked at him, as if she still couldn't believe she had won the heart of the suit-and-tie guy she once mistook for an office assistant. When the officiant asked if Alice took Thomas as her husband, she grabbed the microphone. "Before I say yes, I just want to say, I never thought this would happen. I've always been the girl who misses the bus, spills ice cream on her own pants, and shows up late on her first day of work. But you looked at me like no one ever has. Even when I fell to my knees in your office," she laughed. "Even when I knocked over your company's banner, and even when I made you eat cold coccinas. So, yes, I do. I do want to make a mess of your life every single day until we're old and fighting over the remote control." Thomas chuckled and took the microphone. "I want to say something too." Alice gestured for him to go ahead. "I spent my whole life planning every step, every decision, every minute, until you came along and showed me that the best things in life happen when nothing goes as planned. I love you just the way you are, with coccinas in your pocket, a colorful backpack, and all the clumsy moments still to come. So, yes, I do. I do want to laugh with you every day, even when life tries to knock us down." The guests applauded and cried, and then they kissed. A kiss full of funny, heartfelt, and wonderfully imperfect promises. The reception was a mix of romance and chaos. Alice kicked off the dance floor with a samba furrow mashup, and Thomas, awkwardly, tried to keep up. They cut the cake with a cheese bread spatula, a gift from an employee, and toasted with soda straight from the bottle. And at the end of the night, Alice took off her shoes, climbed onto a chair, and shouted, "Ladies and gentlemen, from this day forward, I officially declare this marriage." She slipped before finishing her sentence. Thomas caught her midair, just like in a romantic comedy. "Our way," she finished, laughing, and that's how Alice and Thomas's wedding ended. No perfection, no fuss, just a whole lot of joy, a whole lot of love, and of course, a whole lot of coccinas. What did you think of Thomas and Alice's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to catch all our stories. And don't forget to check out more heartwarming tales by clicking here on the final screen.